Shabbat Shalom. The temple has a Facebook page, which I know most of you know. And if you look on the Facebook page today, you'll see the first video that we shot in Israel from about a week and a half ago. And before you hit the play button, there's a preview. And if you look straight back in the back of this room, you'll see the face whose face is on the preview. It's Laura Levine's face. And it's a great picture of Laura taken about 20 feet below ground, I think, give or take. It was on the first day of the trip. We were at Beit Guvrin, and we were digging. We were at an active archaeological dig, and there was Laura digging and announcing we have the first find of the day, and she held it up. What was it?
2,200-year-old shard of pottery.
Right. And what was with it? What else did you find besides pottery? Bones, right? And so there we were finding these shards of pottery and bones. This was the last day of Hanukkah, and Beit Guvrin is the place where the Maccabees lived. And so there we were on the very last day of Hanukkah in 2011, digging up the remains of the civilization for whom the holiday was started, or who started the holiday. It was an extraordinary moment for us. What none of us realized at that moment was that in an interesting and fascinating way, we were making good on a promise that day that was made thousands of years before that we read about this Shabbat. This week we read the very last portion of the book of Genesis, and we first learn of Jacob's demise, and then at the tail end, the last few verses, we learn of Joseph's demise. Joseph extracts a promise before he dies that his children and his offspring are to take his bones and bring them back to the land of Israel, and there inter them in the cave of Machpelah with the remains of his ancestors. And as we dug up those bones of animals and shards, we were on some level making good on that promise made all those thousands of years ago. We were returning not with dry bones, but with healthy live bodies. We were making good on the promise of our ancestors, and in doing so, we found, I think, what Joseph wanted us to find, that there is life in the promised land, that there is promise there, and that the place of our matriarchs and patriarchs remains a central place for each of us as Jews. We also found in the land 3 C's. The first was contradictions. Everywhere we looked, we found contradictions. Then there was continuity. And then probably the biggest surprise, maybe not, but a big surprise, was the community that we found. So first to the contradictions. There we were on the very first day, the Knesset, meeting with a member of parliament, a member of Knesset, a woman named Einat Wilf. She is part of the Labor Party bloc there, telling us that the two-state solution may not be the answer, that it may be that the problem between Arabs and Jews is insolvable, that there may not be any answer, and that the answer might be that we've got to live with that unknowing and do the best we can to make life livable and to make sure that there's safety and security for all. And by the end of the day, we were sitting with a Palestinian, a reporter who covers Palestinian affairs for the Jerusalem Post. And wouldn't you know it, you'd expect the opposite answer, and instead we got the very same one. That peace might not be possible. The contradiction in our minds, here we thought we had 2 opposite viewpoints, and they weren't. They were the same. Then we learned about, within our own community, the Jews in Beit Shemesh who were protesting, saying that women need to walk on the other side of the street and sit in the back of the bus. And then there were the rest of the Jews saying, "You're nuts, what are you doing?" And there was a contradiction there. And then a few days later, we were in the Old City. And we had traveled through the Old City and looking at remains of the first temple and the second temple. We traveled through the tunnels by the Western Wall. We'd gone through the Arab market. And we found ourselves in the Christian quarter, outside the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. And we thought, well, for sure, the Christians wouldn't have the problems that we have. How wrong we were. Theirs is contradictory too. For the Church of the Holy Sepulchre isn't overseen by any one branch of Christianity, but rather 4. The Eastern Orthodox, the Coptic Christians, the Greek Orthodox, and the Roman Catholics. The Protestant world sees that site as not a religious site at all. And among those four that do see it as a holy site, they can't agree on a single thing. Not even so much as who's going to open the door in the morning. So literally, the caretaker from one group meets the guy with the key from another group, and together they unlock the door every day. Imagine that. And so we sat in the courtyard of this church thinking of all of the chaos and the contradictions in this city. And here in this one church, they couldn't agree. And the realization was, we all live in that tension. Because inside that church, we didn't see fighting. We saw different groups doing their own thing. And for that matter, in the old city of Jerusalem, frankly, we didn't see fighting. We saw the Muslims doing their thing, the Christians doing their thing, the Jews, the Armenians. It worked. There's no answer for it. But in that tension, in that gray area between knowing what I know is right and knowing what you know is wrong, exists a country and exists a people. And I think as we traveled further in the state, we found that those contradictions become more important to understand, not so much to digest, but to see that the whole world lives that way. And that if we can accept that notion, that the world truly is gray, that there are contradictory views, but that we can still live in peace, then we have an opportunity to move beyond the I'm here and you're there polarity of our current world. Then there was the notion of continuity. At the moment, we were standing in the past, the present, and the future at the very same moment. So how does that look? Well, we were in Tel Aviv towards the end of the trip. We started the day in Old Jaffa, which is the port. John Bronsky knows this port well because it's where Jonah set sail. And John reads Jonah every week on Yom Kippur. And there we were. You could see the port in front of us. You could see the statue of the whale next to us. We were living in the past. And then we went to the Palmach Museum, the museum that told the story of Israel's struggle for independence, and we were in a more recent past. And then from there we went to a place called A Better Place that deals with the electric car market of the future and the electric car grid that's going on in Israel, that's building in Israel. And we saw a peek into what the future is going to be. And then we ended up at Kikar Rabin, at Rabin Square, where the Prime Minister was assassinated about 14 years ago. And there, the present, the tensions, the difficulties became clear. So in one morning, we'd been in the past, the present, the future, and frankly, none of us knew which way was up. But we knew that in that combination of events, we were understanding what Israel is all about, and on a deeper level, we were understanding what it means to be a Jew. To be a Jew means to have 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the present, and 1 in the future. And I know none of us has 3 feet. That, too, is part of the contradiction. And then there was community. So we met at the airport a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago. Jonathan was there snapping our pictures. We didn't quite know what we were all getting into. We'd all sat together 3 or 4 times. We all had our own hopes and ideas of what the trip was going to entail. We spent a lot of time together in close proximity. Tour buses are big, but they're not that big. We got to hear who was afraid of this and who was afraid of that, who liked this food and who liked that food, who prayed to God and who prayed to this curse word, and on and on and on and on. And in those 10 days, we watched as our own community grew. We watched as connections developed. We watched as friendships developed. We watched as respect grew and connections were established. In each of those 3 events, we were fulfilling what Joseph asks of us on this Shabbat. Return my bones to the promised land and make them live again. At the close of each book of the Torah, we say, Chazak, Chazak, v'nit chazek. Be strong, and together we will go forward with strength. I can tell you that for the 25 of us who traveled, those words ring ever more true today than before. We have been strengthened by our trip. We are committed to strengthening our community here. And we know that in doing that, and in sharing what we've learned and discovered, in sharing the questions that we've developed, and I'm pretty sure we all come back with more questions than answers, we have found a way to strengthen ourselves and each other. And we've also found a way to see that though peace is an elusive goal, it's not an impossible one. And that the beginning of that goal comes with being open to learning from others and to growing oneself. So our prayer on this Shabbat as we return is not just for a healthy return and a peaceful voyage, but to live out the words that Joseph utters in his final days, that we too can live in that promised land, that the bones can know life, and that in doing so, we will strengthen our past, our present, and our future. Shabbat Shalom.